All of you for coming today to this presentation we're going to be doing. Once again, if you have any questions throughout about any topic, please just raise your hand, and we're here for you to help you understand these topics, because these topics at the end of the day are intended to keep you safe online. So if you guys need help in the front here, we do have some handouts for you if you need any. They contain a little bit of extra information about future events, as well as just other general information on the topics we're discussing at hand. So without further ado, today's topic is going to be about defeating malware using up-to-date software. Throughout these slides, we hope to explain to you a little bit about what malware is, what exactly we're looking at, and when it comes to devices slowing down and other things, what's happening. We also look to be explaining why updating your devices is the best way to help defeat malware that may be on your devices. So, without further ado, here are some of our other members of the CSCOO, which is the Cybersecurity Community Outreach Organization. Starting with me, my name is Matthew Christoffel. I am the founder and chair of the organization. I started the organization as a part of an internship last summer where we wanted to outreach to all of you lovely people. I realized during that time that outreach was going to take it's a lot longer of a process than over the course of one summer short internship. So I wanted to keep it going. So I founded an organization dedicated to reaching out to everybody. Right in the middle there, we have Amelia C., who is our vice chair. Brandon Kazmierzak, who is our event coordinator. All the way on the right is our awesome digital media manager, Robert Romero. In the back there, we have Aaron Hoffman, our alumni sponsor, and we're also here with some of the members of the CS department. We have Sophia Knox and I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Guiones.
Yeah.
So, once again, I gave you all the hullabaloo about CSCOO, once again, which is an outreach organization. We presented at multiple high schools, trying to teach some high school kids about offensive security practices, try to get them involved in hands-on activities regarding hacking and other things, because it can be a really good learning experience and help get them into the field. We've obviously been to a lot of the different senior center events all throughout Tallahassee, many lunch and learns and other grandparents' and parents meetings. It's all been really fun, and we're glad we get to come out and help present to all of you people. Up here we also have a list of QR codes for our YouTube channel, Instagram, and on the right is the Facebook one. All of this will be given in our newsletter as well. If you want to register for that, all you have to do is grab a business card right up here and scan the QR code. So, with that being said, for today's presentation, we're going to go into just a few different categories. What is malware? Avoiding malware, removing malware, and then we're going to actually talk about built-in anti-malware or antivirus, like Windows Defender, all of your iPhone security apps and other things are already baked into your device the moment you buy it, and it's good to go. We're going to talk about the differences between that and third-party, like Avast antivirus, Malwarebytes, other ones that you may have heard of. McAfee, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of that one. I had to get rid of it on my computer at home after updating. And then lastly, we'll be giving you a brief guide on how to update software to keep safe. There's going to be very familiar patterns as we go through. Yes?
A pencil, a crayon, a pen, or something to write with?
Do any of us have a pencil, paper, and other things to take it up? We can get that for you shortly. No problem. So I think without further ado, we're going to have Aaron Hoffman come up and present a little bit on what is malware.
All right, hey folks, my name is Aaron Hoffman. As Matthew introduced, I am the alumni sponsor for the group. So I graduated class of 2015 from Florida State University, got a job here in Tallahassee after I graduated and basically never left. I'm very fortunate to be working fully remote now, so I get to stay close to family and all that good stuff. But the reason why I'm presenting this section, so I work for a company called Reversing Labs that essentially does what's called malware reverse engineering. And so we take all of these malicious files and all these malware samples, and we basically figure out what it actually does. And then we basically just go and sell that to cybersecurity companies. And so I've been with them for about 3 years. And so let's talk about what actually is malware. So based on the name, you could probably already guess it's malicious software. So software that does bad stuff, stuff that should not be happening on your machine. They're designed to exploit vulnerabilities on your machine so that way they can get the computer or your phone or whatever to do things that it's not supposed to do. And so you might be wondering, okay, well, who's actually doing this? And of course, the obvious ones are criminals, people who want to make money, people who want to scam you. Those are going to be the most common types. You also have hacktivists, and these are folks who are technologists, but they may be doing things for a political gain or just basically something to, example, like trying to breach data from an organization or whatever. And lastly, what we're seeing now more often these days is that governments are actually using malware. And so we'll go over a couple of examples of that in just a moment. So the history of malware basically goes back to the early days of computing in general, with one of the very first known instances of malware in 1971 with the Creeper virus. And so that was kind of more of a, back then, computers were pretty new. The internet itself wasn't really called the internet. There was something called ARPANET back then. The person behind Creeper was like, okay, I want to design a software program that replicates itself across different devices on the ARPANET. And so that's where Creeper was born. So it didn't really do anything crazy. It just replicated itself. Eventually move on into more examples such as the Morris worm in 1988. Similar kind of functionality, but this was the first known instance of an actual worm. And so that is a type of malware that, again, will kind of replicate itself, but in this case, it was going across the internet. So eventually move on. Some of these may be kind of hard to see, but otherwise, some other known examples. In 2010, we had Stuxnet. Most recently in 2017, we had WannaCry, and so I'll go over those in just a second. So again, these are just some examples of the most famous ones. So over on the left-hand side, we have the original floppy disk that Robert Morris actually coded the Morris worm on. And so that is at one of the museums. I think it's up in Washington, D.C. I don't remember which museum it's at, but that is the original floppy disk. In 2010, we had Stuxnet. This was one of the first and most well-known instances of a government actually using malware for either a political or wartime gain. And so in this case, I don't think we ever officially acknowledged it, but it was a piece of malware that in conjunction with the Israeli government, the U.S. actually launched against Iranian nuclear enrichment facilities. And so I think this was the one where they dropped a USB drive or something like that, because those computer networks that control their nuclear facilities, they're generally supposed to be air-gapped, meaning they don't have any connection out to the wider web. So in order to do that, they put the malware or the viruses on a little thumb drive, drop it over there, and somebody picks it up, plugs it in, and then boom, caused their major setback way back when. And again, that was one of the first well-known examples of governments actually using computer malware and viruses to accomplish a goal. Yep. Well, I think in that case, it was more of a, they actually had an inside person drop it off and say like, okay, this is a USB drive with important documents, go plug it in, but same concept. Yep. So you'd be surprised how often that happens. People just pick stuff up and plug it in. So, yep, don't do that. No matter how shiny and cool it looks, just leave it alone. Yep. But so moving on into 2017, this was probably one of the most devastating cyber attacks, at least when it first came out. And now, of course, we've had more scenarios that were very similar. This was one of the most widespread ransomware events. And so I'll talk a little bit about what ransomware actually is in just a moment. But this started out as a tool that was actually supposed to be used, I think, by the CIA or something. It was part of their secret stash of tools that they have. That got leaked. Bad actors got a hold of it. It got leaked out into the rest of the world. Infected, I don't know how many millions and millions of computers, but it was really bad. And so we'll talk about a little bit more about what ransomware actually does and why this was such a bad scenario. But luckily, we had a good Samaritan essentially in the community who managed to single-handedly stop that from getting worse. You can definitely Google that up and learn a little more about that later. But yep. Recent example, something that affects us locally here in Tallahassee. You might have seen a couple days ago, Tallahassee Democrat put out an article. Yep, they were just talking about this. So TMH had something like, I think for TMH, there were a couple thousand or so records stolen, but this was Exactly. Yeah, she goes
Just
farther
came-
back.
And it just
Yep.
came.
They just now acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And so the story behind that is that they have they had a third party vendor called Cerner. Cerner was, I don't remember if they were under Oracle Health or they used Oracle Health for their systems, but regardless, the actual issue was with Oracle Health. And I personally, well, I guess I probably shouldn't talk bad about other companies and whatnot, but this is not uncommon where, like you said, this actual issue happened way back when. They only now, 6 months, year later, acknowledge that it was a real issue. Yep. And you see this very often because one, it's also difficult to know, especially if you are in an organization like that where maybe they don't have the resources to investigate this stuff. It could also be just a legal thing where they have to get all their facts straight before they announce it to everybody. They don't want to tell people, oh, we have a breach, but then suddenly retract that a couple months later. So that being said, I think they're, at least now currently, they are up to like 6 million total records stolen, health records, personal information. And that's just, within the last week. And like I said, we've been going back with malware since 1971. So you can imagine all the information that's out there. So next, I'd like to go into the different types of malware. These are going to be the most common types that we are seeing today. There are several other categories and whatnot, but for most folks, this is the stuff that's popular, that's affecting people and organizations. And so the first one is what is called info stealers or information stealers. And as the name implies, they attempt to steal information. So once that malware gets onto your machine, it's going to look for all your passwords and your browser cookies and your sessions and everything. Credit card numbers, if you have cryptocurrency wallets. Anybody investing in cryptocurrency? Nope. Okay, I'd say that's good, but so they'll take that information, they'll extract it from your machine, and then they will go and sell that on the dark web. And so that's how these criminals make their money. They get all that information and they go and sell that. And so over on the left-hand side, this is a screenshot of the type of data that they will pull. It may not mean much, but they organize it in such an easy way. So like they have the credit card folder, they have your cookies folder, passwords in a text file, all that stuff is right there ready to go. And so what they do is they, again, send that information over to the dark web, and they have all these marketplaces where they sell this stuff. And so you might be thinking, okay, my personal information, that's kind of worth a lot of money to me. If you look over on the right-hand side, there's a whole bunch of different countries where this stuff is for sale. Look at the United States, if you can kind of see that. It's a little blurry, but 159 different passwords for probably 159 different people, $10. So, anybody can afford that. And then suddenly now, okay, I have access to credit cards that I can go and buy who knows what. I can go and log into your accounts and sign you up for stuff that you don't need. So like you were seeing with your phone with all those spam emails, same kind of thing.
That's stealing.
Exactly. That is stealing.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. And this is a very lucrative market. This is the probably number one issue that we see at my job is info stealers are using all this information because it's very easy to bypass all the detections and basically, again, sell this stuff real quick and get rid of it.
Could you do like 1 minute on what they do with cookies?
Yep. So, oh yeah. So if you're not familiar with what cookies are, so whenever you sign into a website, say Facebook or Amazon, that website will set a cookie in your browser. So that way it saves like temporary details. So that way you don't have to log in every single time you go there. So what happens is these info stealers will grab those cookies and they can take that cookie and plug that into their own browser. And essentially they're already logged in as you. So, yep, you don't even need to know the password. You just grab that cookie and bam. Yep. So
That's why I say no, don't say.
exactly. So if you ever see those little pop-ups that say, would you like to enable cookies? Just turn that off. It's annoying to have to sign in every single time, but for security purposes, I always sign in. It's a pain, but always sign in every single time. So like I said, this is a very lucrative business. And what we're seeing now is that these cyber criminals are starting to offer their own businesses within this malware community. And so it's something that we call malware as a service. So we now see people that are building these viruses and this malware. They're not the ones that are actually using it. They're going and selling this malware to other criminals. And you can see from this list, this is one example where they actually have a marketplace where you can go and buy a basic version of the malware for $250. That's cheap because now I can go and deploy that, steal thousands of people's credit card information and do whatever I want. And even at the most expensive tier, $20,000. I mean, think of a large criminal organization. That's nothing. So it's crazy stuff. But so good.
Is that why they taking computers and laptops out of inmate things now because of all this that's going on?
A little bit of that, it's one of those things where if they're removing the machines, it's probably because they've had instances where people have been tampering with it, stuff like that. So, yep. So the safest computer is a computer that's buried 6 feet in the ground. So that's why. Yep. So the second type that we also see is something called crypto miners or cryptocurrency miners. This is something that you will probably not ever know is on your machine until you start saying, wait a minute, why is my machine suddenly very, very slow? Why is the fan running 100% of the time? So what these do is they will mine digital currency or cryptocurrency on your machine. And so when you think about it, yours is just one machine, but if they spread that out to hundreds and thousands and millions of machines, that's a lot easier for them to generate a lot of money, a lot of cryptocurrency across this, what would be called a botnet, essentially. So a network of all these controlled machines. So like I mentioned, these things are going to be using up all the resources on your computer. They will, and that's their entire purpose, is that they are just crunching those numbers to try and build this digital money, fake money, whatever, and then send that back over to themselves for who knows what usage. One thing that we do see very often is that sanctioned governments, places like North Korea, Iran in this case too, they tend to have vast amounts of cryptocurrency because a lot of times it's untraceable. It's things that can bypass these sanctions. And so we see a lot of these less than friendly countries using these methods to generate the money that they use to go and build weapons and whatnot. So just a geopolitical aspect there to it as well. This is one example that you could see. This is the Windows Task Manager. If you've not seen that before, that basically just shows you all the programs that are currently running on your machine. When there are things like viruses or crypto miners in this case that are abusing your machine, you'll see things like where Google Chrome is using like 100% of your CPU or 93% or something. It should never really be using that much unless you have a really ancient machine. But in this case, it's very rare that any one program is going to be using that much resources on your machine. So that's just one sign. But again, you'll probably notice things like, it's a lot slower to open up Windows and turning it on, turning it off, whatnot. And so just a kind of fun thing to kind of see why these are becoming so popular. Obviously, cryptocurrency has become in vogue recently. It's all over the news. People are going from zero to billionaire overnight, all that kind of thing. But so it's just an interesting graph. Way back in 2015, 2016, before the cryptocurrency craze really blew up, you can see over on the left-hand side, it was kind of flat for about the year leading up to 2017, 2018. Then back then, if y'all remember, that was when we had the big, massive blow up with Bitcoin, and also leading up into COVID, of course. That correlates to the rise of crypto miners. Same time frame, 2018. Obviously the criminals are seeing that. They say, hey, I want a chunk of that money. So now they're making the viruses and whatnot that get them that money. But it's just something to see. If cryptocurrency goes back down, maybe they'll stop doing it, but who knows? The third type that I'm going to highlight today is what we call remote access Trojans, or RATs. And these are basically tools that allow criminals to remotely control your machine. So you may have heard of stories of people saying like, oh, the hacker controlled my webcam, or they took pictures of my desktop and stuff like that. That's what these are. These do actually exist. And so these can be custom made where they are purpose built to do nefarious things, but they can also be legitimate IT support software. So there are tools such as like TeamViewer or AnyDesk where IT teams will actually use them for legitimate purposes. But they can, again, just like anything else, bad people can use tools for their own reason. This is a screenshot of NJRAT. This was a pretty popular sample a while ago. This is essentially the control panel for the operator for this malware. So you can kind of see, essentially, they'll have a giant list of all the different machines that are infected with this malware. They can go in anytime. They can go and run a program. They can pull files off the machine. You can see there's a remote camera option, turn on the microphone, stuff like that. So again, these things do actually exist. Now, the majority of the time, these are going to be used so that way these criminals can make sure like their crypto miner is running. Half the time they don't care about what's on the webcam unless maybe you're a person of interest. So if you're a high level politician, yeah, they might be looking for camera pictures or whatever. But everyday person, it's mostly going to be just to control the machine itself to do something else. The fourth type, and probably the most impactful, at least from the business side, is ransomware. Like I mentioned, these kind of first came around. I remember I was actually working over at the Staples on North Monroe Street when we started seeing our first examples of ransomware coming in. People would say, or they were bringing their laptops and they're like, I can't do anything. It's all locked out. It says the FBI is controlling my machine. What do we do? And we had no idea what was going on because we hadn't seen it before. But basically, also again, as the name implies, this is malicious software, malware that is holding your computer for a ransom. And so it does that by locking or encrypting your machine and all your files so that way you can't access it. The vast majority of the time, especially now, it's very difficult to reverse that or decrypt all that data. And one thing that I really want to kind of just make a sticking point, if you ever see that, do not pay the ransom. In this case, most of the government agencies are recommending that as well. Just do not pay it because there's no guarantee that you're actually going to get your files back, like anything else. Now, it is in the criminal's best interest to give you your files back, but there are situations where we've seen it where maybe the criminal wrote some really bad software and suddenly they can't even unlock the files themselves. So, we've seen scenarios that happen. And so just like we saw before with general malware as a service, ransomware is also being offered as a service. And so think about how I talked about those info stealers at the very beginning, where they would grab passwords and whatnot and then go and sell that. It's a whole supply chain of basically those info stealers getting all those passwords and access to different machines, selling that to what we call initial access brokers and ransomware affiliates. And then they're basically taking that information to go and deploy their ransomware to now hold the business or person or whoever ransom, essentially. So, good.
What's the frequency of like just a private individual being in
ransom like this
versus a big company where there's actually some value to their data?
It can happen, but when you think about what a criminal is trying to do, they want to get the most value for their work effort. A lot of times what we'll see is that what we call like blowback, essentially, when they will do these ransomware campaigns and go after a business, but maybe random email just gets happened to sent out to be like an individual, or maybe somebody opens up that email with the malware in it at home. That's kind of how that will spread. So it's rare that individuals will see that these days. It's typically more happening to businesses because, like I said, they started out that way where they thought, okay, I can ransom somebody for $500 way back in 2013. Now I can ransom big company A for $5 million. So, but that being said, this is still something to be aware of, just because there are also fake examples of this. You may have seen some emails that come through and they'll say, oh, we've got screenshots of you doing something weird, give us some money, stuff like that. So they will use that threatening language to try and trick you, basically. Exactly. It's whole roads. Yep. If you've been getting those texts, I got one this morning. So, yep. Oh, yeah. Nope. Yep. Don't even do that because the state will mail you something if they want their money. But so this is a screenshot of what a ransom note will look like. Generally what happens is they will either replace like the wallpaper on your computer, so that way that's the only thing that you see, or they'll put a file on there that says like, here's how you restore your files. And they'll give you instructions. And like I said, a lot of these things are now becoming their own businesses. They actually will have sometimes phone numbers that you can call. They'll have a little help center that says, hey, this is criminal enterprise, whatever. Happy to help you unlock your files if you give us, $500. So it's pretty crazy what they're doing, but it's lucrative because it works. People pay. And just one thing to point out is that you'll see in these scenarios is that suddenly, if you notice like all of your documents or whatever, like they have what's called a new file extension. So that little string at the very end, they'll typically have something weird that you've never seen before. In this case, it'll say Lockbit is the ransomware, but it may be something else. But essentially, when you start seeing all your files with that, then that's when you know you got hacked. So a lot of what these ransomware groups are doing now is in order to kind of prompt the victim organizations to actually pay is that if they do not pay in a certain period of time, they will leak all of that data. So business information, plans, customer information, all that good stuff. And so they set up these leak sites on the dark web. So anybody can go there and look and see. In this case, there were 7 or 8 different examples of companies that got ransomed. And they put a little timer on there, 24 hours, give us the money or else. And then you can see if most of these, actually all these except for one, either they didn't pay or they didn't know, or who knows, but their data got published out to the web. So yeah, that's just another thing, is that they're not just waiting around, they want their money and to get out. So this is a kind of a time chart example of the total number of ransomware payments that have been made over time. And you can see since 2019, 2019 was, all right, it wasn't too bad, about 220 million or so, but now we're starting to get into the $1 billion range of payments that are being made to these attackers. So again, very lucrative business. And of course, funny little comic, as in the business world, it's a very strong balance of how much money do I put towards actually paying to protect my company versus just paying the ransomware operators. So, all right, just a couple things, just some signs of a malware infection. So like I mentioned before, if you start noticing some sudden slow performance, high resource usage, your fans on your device are spinning up 100% all the time, you start seeing unusual pop-ups on your screen, maybe your computer crashes a bunch of times that you haven't noticed before, new programs that have been installed, and then high data usage like on your phone as well. Those may be signs that you might have a malware infection on your machine. It could also just mean that you have an aging device. So it's always good to just kind of be aware of those signs. And one thing that I do really want to highlight is that if somebody calls you up and says, hey, we noticed that your machine has malware on it, hang up, because Microsoft doesn't have time to call every single person that's got malware. The FBI is not going to do that. So just hang up. It's going to be a scam. So just kind of wrap up this introductory section is that malware is software that does bad stuff. It's been around since computers have been around themselves. They are a very popular way for criminals to make money. And then the 4 common types that we're seeing today are going to be the info stealers, your crypto miners, remote access Trojans, and ransomware. All right, so we're going to have Matthew come up and talk about some tips on how to avoid malware. There you
go. All right, let me grab that. Okay, so yeah. This is just going to be a pretty short section on what you can do to avoid malware. So generally speaking, these are some of the best tenets you can have when it comes to actually avoiding malware. A lot of it is in your control here. So how malware spreads is, the first step is if you click fake download buttons or pop-ups. A lot of ads and a lot of websites will try to get you into clicking random links. You may find ads that say, click here, download now, green arrows, all these bright and flashy buttons. If you see like all these bright and flashy buttons, you really got to pay attention and see like what's a part of the site and what's an ad. If you look closely, it's pretty clear to tell what's what. Opening suspicious email attachments or links. All of us here get texts and emails and even phone calls regarding, call us back, go to this site, USPS, your package is out for, what is it? You haven't received your package, you must call and make a payment, or this, that, the other thing. Be very careful when clicking any links, because oftentimes they're going to ask you for credit card information or other things, but sometimes those links can lead you to sites that'll download all these malwares that we were talking about onto your machines without you even knowing. Another one that we'll actually see an example of, installing cracked or pirated software. Oftentimes, sometimes you may want a piece of software where they're charging you like $200 a month, or if it's like, if you're familiar with like digital media editing products like Adobe, the Adobe suite, there's a lot of, free cracked Adobe Premiere Pro, Photoshop, other things. Free Minecraft as another good example. If you have young ones using the computer or other things, that is one of the quickest ways to get malware I've seen recently. And the last one, visiting sketchy websites. So be very careful with where you're going online. Generally speaking, you just need to make sure that you go to well-known sites In our next lecture, we'll go into just a few basics on like how you can do that and what to pay attention to there. But for now, just if the site that you're on looks sketchy, or if it's not HTTP versus HTTPS, I believe some of us may have already heard about why that's important, then, if it's HTTP, you usually don't want to be there because it's not validated. It might not be an authentic site. Yes.
I got a problem with the roadblocks.
The roadblocks?
Yeah, when you invite other people, and these people are older than the 8-year-old, and they don't, older people like you.
Mhm.
You shouldn't be playing on roadblocks with
Yes.
somebody your age.
Yes. So you want to know about like those sort of parental controls and other things.
Right.
That is going to be, we're going to go very in detail on that in our next lecture next week. So today we're focusing on keeping your devices updated and other things. But that is a good question, and I highly recommend you go to the next lecture. So, but yeah. So speaking of the young ones who may be using the computer, so take for example, if you look up any sort of cracked software or free software on YouTube, even, and you can find this immediately on YouTube, you're going to find a whole bunch, hundreds and thousands of results on free software, free games, free Adobe. And one thing that you're going to see is it has all these very catchy, clickbaity names. A lot of YouTube names are clickbaity nowadays, but regardless, with a lot of emojis, free download, spawn items, blah, 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 blah. One of the things to pay attention to here is the fact that they give you, one, a link that is shortened, so you don't really know where that's going. One thing that I really recommend is hovering over any link you're about to click, because when you hover over it, a little box will pop up, and it'll tell you exactly where you're going, but so that you don't have to necessarily rely on this. Another thing is we see a password, pass0909. So what's actually happening here is that your browser wants to prevent you from downloading any malware or potentially problematic software. There's a lot of ways that your browser is able to detect this sort of thing. But what attackers have found out in order to get malware onto, obviously, this is an attack on just us, anyone who is looking out for these like pieces of software. So users, obviously, businesses aren't going to be searching for cracked Adobe products, right? But what they do is they encrypt the file, and in order to decrypt it, you need a password. So that's how they get around the browsers. Is the browsers, if your file's encrypted, they can't know if it's a virus or not. They don't know what's in it. But when you type in that password and unzip and decrypt that file, when you try to run it, they'll give you a full walkthrough on how to do that. Click allow, administrative privileges, all these things that you should be keeping your eye out for. If you see a software that that has a sketchy link and moreover is in a encrypted zip file, avoid that. Anything that looks like this, you do not want to click. Another good example, Google Ads are a great place to get malware, because how this essentially works is that anybody can bid for Google's ad space. They can just send money Google's way and have a reasonable enough looking website or product or anything. And then if Google approves it and they receive the money, boom, they can put up all of these fake softwares into their actual Google ads. And you'll see this on ads as well, for like on any news site that you go on, where you'll see ads here, there, the other thing, free download. Depending on the site you're going on, it can get a lot worse. But here's an example of OBS, which is a screen recording software that I've actually seen this very attack before when I went to download it. This isn't so much of an issue with OBS right now, at least when I checked. But in the past, you can see we have OBS Studio, Studio OBS, OBS Studio. And if we look at the URLs on these ads, is the most important thing you can do. We see downstairs.store, imploreworm.shop, another curtace.store, all of these links that don't make any sense for the software we're trying to download. On all the way toward the bottom, because Google ads get put first. Google wants you to see the ads. People are paying to be there, right? All the way down to the bottom, we actually see the official link for the download page. So be very careful when you're looking out for these kind of things. Another thing, when you're on your mobile device, or any device really, a lot of these websites, what they'll do is they'll have a little fake press the allow button or download here, click here to do this. In this case, on the bottom here, we see this site. Usually it's going to say this site, blah, 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 whatever it is. In this case, we see a very suspicious looking URL at the top, qlta.kilimanjaro, all these things. It's not a good link. Wherever you are right now, it's probably not a very good website. But we see press allow button to verify you're human. Now, if we look at the notification, it's asking wants to show notifications. That's not a CAPTCHA, like, many of us have already probably filled out a CAPTCHA, click these little boxes to get through and prove you're human. That's not what that is. That is your phone's operating system prompting you to give this website privileges. Generally speaking, you don't really want any real there's no real reason to have a website have notification privileges. You'll go through and download apps that you'll want to give you the notifications. If a website is asking you for them, just don't do it. There's usually not a good reason to do so. On the right, we have another very similar example, but without that little notification pop-up. So just be very careful. One, where you are. Neither of those URLs look very good. Two, be aware of this technique where they're going to try to convince you to press your phone's operating system notifications. So, and then here is an example on phishing scams for emails. This is a fantastic little guide on how to spot and important things to look out for when it comes to phishing emails. A lot of us should have already been very familiar with all sorts of email scams that we may be getting. You just deleted one today, just before we started the presentation. So a lot of things to keep on the lookout for is, one, based on your example, you were prompted for a product that you weren't paying for, right? So be on the lookout. If you didn't ask for something and you're getting unsolicited emails, just delete them. It's just marketing stuff, or it could be malicious. In this case, we see a fake email address. So can anyone here tell me why this email address doesn't look real? One of the first things that I'm looking out for is the actual domain of the email address. So we see Office 365, that could be any username they want it to be. But if we look at the @security on Microsoft.com, that's not a real Microsoft domain name. That's not a real site. That can be anything else that they wanted it to be. So just be very careful with where these emails are coming from. If it's not from mail.microsoft.com, then it's not real. Another thing is watch out for any attachments that people are sending your way. On one of my email accounts, I'm getting a lot of invoice.pdf. In fact, I didn't really get any of those until very recently regarding invoice.pdf, but I've gotten several, at least 15 within the last month regarding you need an invoice. Payment is required for your example. So these attacks are ramping up and getting more common. And what attackers can do is they can embed malware in those documents, PDFs, any kind of file that you download and you put on your computer. People can embed software in there, and you have to be really careful. Another thing, dear customer, this is a Office 365 email. I would think that they would address me by my account name, not dear customer, right? And most important thing when it comes to any phishing scam ever, urgency. If a email, message, text message, phone call, anything is your account is about to delete it, payment is required now, right now, that's them trying to get you to do something. They're trying to give you that sense of urgency so that you just download that invoice to look at what it says. Do not do that. Don't get curious when it comes to a sense of urgency. If you're at all concerned, I highly recommend you call the company who they're posing as. I would call Microsoft or email Microsoft and say, hey, I got this email thing. Is everything okay? that's fully within your power and doesn't involve you potentially getting into trouble. Another thing, give a look out for grammar. And once again, there's that little hover over link box. We can see that as they're hovering over that text, which, we'll see a lot of text that's hyperlinked, and that text, they can make that text anything they want it to be, even posing as other URLs if they wanted to. So that blue text could say www.microsoft.com, but when you hover over it, it shows that it's not even a registered domain. It's just this random computer. That set of numbers is an IP address. So they didn't even go through the effort of registering anything for that. So please be careful when looking out for all these phishing scams. So what can you do? So regarding the ads that we went over before, because whenever we're browsing our news sites or any site, we're going to see a bunch of random ads that people just pay to be on there, right? I would recommend using an ad blocker. Now, there is a push against ad blockers by a lot of companies because obviously ads are what give them money, and it is well within their power to ask you to stop or put it against your terms of service. A good example of that is recently YouTube. I believe it is against YouTube's terms of service to use an ad blocker now. So you may have to disable it for certain sites in order to get the same functionality. But when you're just browsing, generally speaking, an ad blocker is a great way to keep you safe. Going back to this example, I won't see any of those Google ads. My ad blocker blocks all of those, and same for the news sites. I'll show you an example of what that may look like. So here's an example of what it looks like. I'll go into that in just 1 minute. But what I mean by all of these ads you may see. So first of all, we have a very annoying pop-up for this news site, One Green Planet, that contains a lot of recipes, that are supposed to be healthy recipes. Here's this pop-up. Enter to win the free sweepstakes. Enter your first name, last name, email, sign me up. Yeah. We also see some Google ads. Now, on certain sites, those ads can be dangerous. So I do recommend you be careful when clicking on any of those ads. But if you just want to get rid of them and keep yourself safe, this is what it looks like with an ad blocker. No pop-up, no Google ads, and it looks a lot more usable. So it's just a lot better over time when browsing the internet.
So how do you just, is it an app for that?
I'll show you. I'll go into this in just one moment. So once again, when downloading software, go to the official sites. If ever you're thinking, I want to get this for free, not a lot of things in life are free, and especially ain't nothing free. So if it's too good to be true, do not do it whatsoever. And one of the most important things, keep all of your software and browsers and everything updated. We're going to be showing toward the end of this on how to do that, because we're going to see a pattern start to emerge as we're updating our things. And once again, regarding phishing scams and other things we're going to see online, do not click anything suspicious. Don't get curious. Don't wonder where that USPS text message is taking you. Leave that to the professionals to investigate and get curious about. We want to stay safe. So regarding ad blockers, on your browser, there's actually, unfortunately, it's not in this screenshot, but on your browser, if you want to just really quick write this down, there will be a puzzle symbol toward the top right of your browser. And it's unfortunately, I don't think you can get it on your phone, but on your laptop, desktop, or computer browser, toward the top right, there'll be a puzzle symbol. When you click that, it'll take you to the extension store. You can also just search extensions, and the first link should take you to your browser's appropriate extension store. So you can either go to the top right or just search for it. When you're there and you want to search for an ad blocker, just type ad blocker, and this is the thing to be careful about, because ad blockers, just like everything else, can be malicious, can be malware. When you download one, you're going to get a pop-up saying, this extension wants to read all of your data, wants to do all of this, access your, hopefully not access information, but they need that in order to do what they do, which is blocking ads. They obviously need to read the content to block out what you don't want to see. A malicious one can just the same say, I need to read all your data. So what's important to recognize is, one, it's featured. On the Chrome extension store, this is they went through and verified the software. They have a team dedicated to verifying extensions. There's also a website. go to the website and make sure, yeah, this seems good. And the third most important thing, the amount of installs. We see that we have 290,000 downloads, or ratings, actually, not even downloads. That's 290,000 people who went out of their way to give that application 4.5 stars. That immediately tells me that's probably a pretty valid piece of software. Same for the rest of these three examples. We have featured, a lot of rates and other things. If a ad blocker has 100 ratings, even 1,000 ratings, you may want to go for a better example one, or one that's, and if it doesn't have the featured, don't even think about it, because that means Chrome has not validated it. Same thing goes for Firefox, by the way, if any of you happen to use that. But yeah, once again, before, after. A pretty big difference. So now,
It'll just, every website that you hit, it will block the ads from,
yep.
wow.
So some applications try to pull different tricks, like actually embed videos and other things. But for the most part, on almost any site you go on, it makes a monumental difference. So, but once again, it is within every website's power to say you can't do that, or this site will not work unless you disable it. They can also do that. So some sites you're just going to have to accept it. But for the most part, it may be a good opportunity for you to no longer have to deal with a bunch of annoying ads or dangerous ads. So this is where I wanted to get into, because some of us may be here wondering about, how many of us use Windows here on their computer? Mac? So Mac, Windows, a lot of these software, a lot of these computers, they come baked in with Windows Defender, Mac, I believe Defender X, something like that. I forget the exact name, but something X. X Protector? Something. I don't remember the name. X Protect. That was it. Sorry. OS X, blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to go into the differences between the built-in Defender versus these third-party, Avast, all these other ones, McAfee. So what are some of the differences? So first of all, obviously, pre-installed and free. With XProtect and Windows Defender, there's no need to download or pay for anything else. It's already there, baked in the moment you have your computer. Another thing, it's integrated with the operating system. It's not going to unnecessarily slow your computer down, for the most part. If it's doing active scans, you may notice a little bit of resource take up, but that's the same for anyone. But the thing is, they're going to be doing only their job, and obviously the developers of these anti-malware want to make sure your computer is still usable while you're running it. So they make sure and do testing to make sure it works well with the system. Another thing, it is a strong baseline defense when paired with safe habits. Now that is the important part here. If you are just generally browsing the internet and doing all of the usual things, and namely doing safe habits, these defenders will work perfectly well. If you find yourself frequently clicking on malicious links, or going to, or maybe you have to, for whatever reason, go on to sketchier than most websites or other things, maybe this antivirus might not be the best, and it may be a better idea to invest. It's an investment if you want to choose a third-party one, if you need that added extra protection. But nowadays, for a lot of us regular users, as long as we're doing safe practices, that is not necessary. So another thing is that Windows specifically includes ransomware protection, meaning they back up a lot of your data to the cloud, is one of their main features, so that you can easily recover from that if in the event that there's a ransomware protection. You may have to enable that, but you'll have to look into that yourself. We'll show you how to get there in these slides. With third party though, so a lot of us, some of us may be paying for a subscription. So some of these applications require you to pay for a subscription, or keep asking you. When I had McAfee antivirus on my computer for all of 10 seconds, I got pop-up after pop-up asking me to, you're not protected, your browser isn't protected, please use our VPN. So obviously they want my money, they want me to pay for their subscription. But there may be some free versions, like Avast free antivirus and other things like that. But they're just providing other services. So another thing that they'll provide is extra features. When you pay for these subscriptions, it'll come baked in with VPNs, password managers, all these other things that we may not even want or need. It's another consideration there. Now, this is an important one and goes back to what I was talking about, depending on your use cases. If you find yourself being frequently like clicking on malicious links, just by happenstance or whatever, in the past you've had a lot of these incidences and you're willing to invest in one, they can detect threats missed by built-in tools. And just based on my research, oftentimes having just an extra one can help Windows Defender, because Windows Defender may miss some things that another software may pick up. It's just an added layer of protection. Now, in the past, I don't know if this is the case so much anymore, but in the past, there was a lot of conflicts with the built-in antivirus, to a point where I believe even some third party would go out of their way to disable Microsoft Defender and other things, which could potentially put your computer at more risk. Once again, I'm not exactly certain if that still is the case nowadays, but something to consider about any of these potential conflicts. Another thing, once again, just to reiterate, if you think that you are a high-risk user, then it might be useful for you. Another thing is that some of these tools have very specialized software, like removing adware, spyware, unwanted programs. You may see about like Malware bytes. They have like a specific ad blockers and ad removers and other things like that to try to get all this extra stuff off your computer that you don't want to see. So I highly recommend. There's a link on the little brochure that we have up here that has a whole bunch of resources to look into some of these third-party softwares. We'll go into that later toward the end of the lecture. When in doubt, if you do find yourself having, your computer is really slow, you have all these protections, Microsoft is active, but you are pretty sure, or you're at least having trouble with your device, just go onto Google and search computer virus removal Tallahassee. And when you go to the maps, you're going to see a bunch of businesses local in the area dedicated to dedicated to helping you. Panhandle PC, all computer and electronic servicing. There's a lot of resources here in Tallahassee that are here to help you. Just one Google search away. So I can't recommend that enough. So now I'm going to go into just a little bit of a guide on what it looks like to try to update some of your devices. And we're going to see a very similar pattern come up here. So just a quick little comic here. An update is available for your computer. So for me, I use Linux on a lot of my computers. So it really is just cool, more free stuff. For Windows, some of us may have had that experience of, I want to go use my computer, but I just turned on instant blue screen, updating for the next 20 or so more minutes. Not again. And then Mac just always wants more money. So it's pretty good there. So for Windows, for those of us that may have Windows 11, in order to make sure that you're getting these updates, because in order to keep your device safe, your system must be as up-to-date as possible. That is the best way to prevent any sort of malicious attack. In order to do this, you simply have to press the Windows key, or in the bottom left of your desktop there, you'll see the little Windows button. Just go there, and you're going to see this pop up over and over again. A little gear symbol, this little cog, is the almost universal symbol for settings for a device. Click that on almost any device. We're going to see this over and over again, and that'll take you to the settings. Now, on the bottom left, we'll see Windows Update. And two things here. Up in the top right, we have a check for update button, but what I would highly recommend is, for a lot of these different devices you may have, there will be a way to get the latest updates as soon as they come out. Absolutely do that. You'll see right here in the text, impossible to read up there, but it says, be among the first to get the latest non-security updates and other things. But if you enable that, a lot of these things will be rolling out security updates, because there's these things called 0 days where attackers can exploit your computer based on malware and malicious software that nobody has even discovered or recognized yet. And as they update the software, as you update your operating system, they may include that in the detection using your Windows Defender or any other device. Keep them updated. So for Windows 10, very similar. Hit the Windows key, go to the bottom left, hit the cog wheel. When you're there, update and security down to the bottom. There's also, for a lot of our devices, I just showed you earlier, there's a search bar. Highly recommend for any problem you're having on your device, whether it's notifications, anything, first stop shop, find the search bar in your settings app. And then from there, you can just search up any issue you're having. In this case, we want update and security. Very similar to Windows 11. Check for updates and make sure you check that box. Get the latest updates. Mac OS. So this is for if you're using a Mac computer. Once again, go to your little settings options, and we can see once you're already there, if we go to General, in this case, you're going to find that there are software updates. And your device will actually tell you, whether if you have an iPhone or anything, it'll tell you if there is an update available. So if you ever see that, try to download that as soon as possible. Remember, that's how they keep your devices safe. So with that in mind, different versions of these may look different. I believe there was a instance where really older versions of Mac may have it locked behind the App Store or other things where you have to go out of your way to download them. So once again, if you're ever confused, go to the App Store, or Google is your friend. I highly recommend that if you're at all lost. But once again, settings, cogwheel, go there. And then from there, we can see automatic updates, security responses. In order to enable the updates, if you hit that little I option, it's going to bring up all of the options for how to automatically update your device. But immediately upon clicking that, you're going to see update and install options. So highly recommend just going through and accepting those, and make sure your device is plugged in. A lot of these computers will stop you from doing updates if they're not plugged in or if the battery is low. Generally, whenever you're about to update a device, highly recommend that you have it plugged in. So,
Is there any risk for doing automatic software updates?
is there any risk to doing automatic software updates? The benefits definitely outweigh the risks. Some risks you may find is, my entire computer looks completely different. But the thing with that is that even if that is the case, you know that you're safe from attacks is the main thing. And obviously, as I showed, there's a lot of ways. Just clicking ads, browsing, one mistake is all it takes to get a malware on your computer, or any sort of security vulnerability that people discover. When you update, you stay safe from all of that. And that alleviates the risk of having attackers get into putting an info stealer in your computer, taking all of your account credentials, and potentially losing a lot of money or data, right? So the benefits there, to me at least, drastically outweigh any of the concerns. Although it might be annoying, but it's always good to learn how to use all these newer software, because the newer software have a bunch more features. Does that answer your question? Awesome. But I did refrain a while ago from updating from Windows 10 to Windows 11 because I didn't want my entire computer to look differently. But after doing a lot of research in computer science, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages there. So when you're up to date, when you click the settings option, you should see your device is up to date. So just keep in mind that if you have a Mac that is older than 2017, namely, if you have, for Mac's cases and a lot of Mac devices, they tend to want you to buy the newer products. So they will block older versions of their devices from receiving the most recent updates. That's something that they are well within their power to do. But generally, having better hardware can also keep you safe too. So, and also just makes it more usable as the internet changes, with more ads. So now we're going to move on to iPhone. Very similar. Boom, settings, general. So this is very similar to how Mac works. Settings, general, cogwheel, 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 3 times over. And now we're going right into automatic updates on. You may not want to turn on beta updates. That's where the downsides might start to crop up more, because when you do beta updates, that's software that's still in testing and they want us users to test it. So that's going to sacrifice a lot of stability. I don't recommend turning on those, but for automatic updates that are released, highly recommend having those on. Android Pixel. If you happen to have an Android phone, once again, cogwheel, settings. We're going to go to system. We've seen system settings pop up for a lot of these mobile devices. Go to system, software updates. You'll immediately see it. Once again, where do we go if we just don't know where to find this at all? Google, or when we open settings, we can find our own search bar. So highly recommend going there, because it could be very different in a lot of different Android phones. There's a lot of different ones out there. So, but how about Samsung? Boom, cogwheel, settings, software update, download and install, and boom. And that's how you can keep your devices updated. Now, are there any questions about anything that we went over for today? Does it make sense on how to keep your device updated? And that goes the same for almost any device you have out there. Is you're going to see cogwheel, settings, update, update, update. So I hope you can understand the importance of how updating our devices keeps us safe, and the differences between getting a vast antivirus and just using the Windows one. Generally, all you need is what's baked in with your devices if you are not an at-risk user or a higher risk person. So I appreciate all of you for coming. If you need any help with any of your devices, we have a lot of people here ready to help you if you have any questions about your individual devices.